We're joined today by David Hewitt. David is somebody who's been in the outback for a very long period of time, somebody who has contributed greatly to regional communities. As we've travelled around, David, people have said to us, you know, if you're talking about feral camels, the person you've got to talk to is David Hewitt. So we're delighted to have you here today and to talk to you about the issues. You've made an amazing contribution to Outback Australia, as I said, and both you and your wife have been awarded the Order of Australia, so congratulations on that. But I guess one of the sad issues that we deal with in the outback at the moment is feral camels.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Yeah, over the last 40 years it's changed tremendously. And I think we've got to get away from this romantic thinking about camels. Certainly they helped to open up Central Australia. When the railway line only came to Oodnadatta, beyond Oodnadatta all transport depended on camels. There were a few other methods of transport tried. That there were a few donkey teams and bullock wagons, but they always got back to the camels because they were reliable, they didn't cost much to run, they didn't have to provide much water for them. But yeah, as I said, those days have passed, and really we've got to look at the environmental damage of camels, the damage that they're causing to local community infrastructure, and the damage that they're causing to the pastoralists. And our hearts go out to some of the Central Australian pastoralists. Last few years they've had some pretty tough times through the drought, and the last thing they want is for camels to be destroying their water supplies and their expensive fencing. And we've seen that quite a bit at stations like Mulga Park and Curtin Springs, where we know the owners down there, and they've been having some difficult times with camels.
Can you give us a sense of, you know, as you said, you talked about seeing one camel on that was a bit of an event. Can you give us a sense of how many camels you do see these days? We're talking about pretty big numbers, aren't we?
Oh, that's right. We've seen mobs up to about 250. It's difficult to count them accurately because they're moving. Even if they're just grazing, they tend to move around a bit, and it's difficult to count the numbers accurately. But a few times we've stopped our Land Rover, I've climbed up on the roof rack and tried to estimate the numbers, and yeah, mobs of up to about 250. And we've heard reports too of pilots who have seen mobs they estimate up to 400 or 600. Out at Culka Community, near the corner of the three states a couple of years ago, we counted about 600 in the community there. They were destroying everything in sight, including young desert kurrajong trees that have been planted around the community. People sometimes have no idea of the impact that these animals are having on remote communities. At Warracoona community a couple of years ago in the Rawlinson Ranges, only 5 kilometres from the Giles weather station, they had mobs of up to 100 camels rampaging through the communities. And well, even 20 camels can cause a lot of damage. But one Saturday morning at Warracoona, overnight the camels had broken their main water pipeline, which was a PVC pipe. And the water, I guess an area of 100 metres square, was covered in 20 or 30 camels were wallowing through this water, and the Aboriginal kids were playing in the water as well. Camels had urinated in it overnight, and the whole area was just absolutely putrid. The doctor and nurses there at the time were very concerned about health problems, and fortunately soon after that the community agreed for some pet meat shooters to come in, and in the following 3 months they shot 980 camels around Warracoona. That solved the problem for a little while, but then 12 months later they were all back again, and in fact 2 years later the shooters came back and got about another 800 camels. So it's an ongoing problem. It's possible to rid one area of camels temporarily, and we saw this at Jukkala community a couple of years ago where the pet meat shooters shot 400 over a 2-month period. But 3 months later we had a couple of hundred camels around the community again. Right. Look, we need to do something today. In fact, 40 years ago, if we'd seen an impending problem, we could have shot camels then, and we probably wouldn't have the problem we've got today. But the experts say that they're increasing something like 70,000 a year. So every day that we do nothing about them, when we finally have to tackle the problem, there'll be so many more camels that will have to be destroyed. But yeah, we've got to think of the impact on the environment too. And some of the damage that the camels are doing is almost irreversible. We've seen beautiful rock holes that have been totally destroyed by camels, and that they've got access to areas that we wouldn't have believed a camel could walk into, and yet when they're desperate for water, they'll do anything. I think there are probably three different aspects of the impact of camels. First is the impact on the environment, the plants and vegetation that they're destroying, and the pollution of waterholes. The second problem is the damage they're doing in remote communities. At Warracoona in 2007, the administrator out there estimated that over a 3-month period they caused over $100,000 worth of damage to community infrastructure. And that's $100,000 that should have been spent on providing better facilities for the local Aboriginal population. And yet the community had to outlay that money replacing air conditioners, repairing fencing, a vegetable garden that the local doctor was establishing was totally destroyed one night. They had additional health problems because of the camels walking through the community. But the third issue is the impact on pastoralists, and that's something that's probably hasn't been considered as much as it should be, because the pastoralists are outlaying a lot of money on repairs to windmills, tanks and fencing because of the damage caused by camels. Out at Jurakali community 4 or 5 years ago, before the mail plane landed, we had to do several runs up the airstrip to make sure that there were no camels around, because if an aircraft encountered a camel as it came into land, you know, there'd be very serious consequences. And the chief pilot in the air service that was providing the mail runs to these communities sent out a letter warning communities that if they didn't control the camel access to their airstrips, then they wouldn't receive an air mail service anymore. And the communities just depend so much on their weekly mail service these days that they couldn't afford not to see the mail plane coming in. And the other issue is the flying doctor, especially airstrips that have lighting and can have night landings. There's a huge problem there with camels that might invade the airstrip at night. And we've seen a couple of strips. One example was out at Punmu community in the Pilbara 2 years ago. A lot of their landing lights on the strip were broken off by camels. I guess they were just inquisitive, nosing around the lights, and broke the lights off. And those lights are essential for night landing. We've seen issues too with road accidents. We knew of a nurse who ran into a camel approaching a remote community. She and her husband were there for 24 hours. They both had serious injuries before help came along. Northwest of Alice, 2 men were killed in 2008 when their vehicle hit a camel. On the Docker River Road just a couple of weeks ago, a vehicle struck 2 camels. The vehicle was written off and the driver finished up in hospital.
Amazing, amazing stuff. Look, thank you very much, David. Thank you for your time and talking to us today. It's an absolute pleasure to talk to somebody who's been here and contributed so much to Outback Australia and who really does understand the problem. So thanks very much.
Oh, it's okay, Dale, and I hope that we'll see some positive action in these areas in the very near future.